Alright, man. All praises be to Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahweh Shai, Ba'asham, Racha, Kudash, Barakta Yahweh, Barakta Yahweh Shai, Barakta Yahweh, Barakta Yahweh Shai, Kal Halal Yahweh, Ba'asham, Yahweh Shai, Ba'asham, Racha, Kudash, Tamyad. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders at Great Millstone, who rule well, and salutations unto the Arkham that continue to push the word in truth and in sincerity, and pretty much I'm gonna get into a very brief, a brief overview of Daniel, the 8th chapter, the breakdown of this chapter. Okay, so without further ado, let me get into it. So it says here, I need a new Bible, man. This one's broken. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And the name Daniel in the Hebrew, Daniel Allah, judge my power, basically means, the power of God is my judge, so, and it says in verse 2, and I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that was at Shushan, in the palace which is in the province of Elam, which are those East Indians, okay? And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes, and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Okay. And the ram with horns is pretty much dealing with the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay. And it says, in fact, let me see something. You kind of get the same thing in the previous chapter, Daniel 7 and 5, and it says, and behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise, devour, and arise, devour much flesh, Okay. So that's that second beast, all right? And again, in Daniel 7 and 5, that bear, again, is who? The Medo-Persian Empire, man. Okay, and if you go back in Daniel 8, which we're in the 3rd verse, it says, then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Okay, and pretty much you can read into that, that in the history, that's pretty much the fall of the Assyrian Empire, which was taken down by Darius. Okay, Darius the Mede. Alright, so the Persian Empire was greater. That's the horn. They were both high, but that's the horn that was higher. The Persian Empire was greater. Okay, so in Daniel 8 and 4 now, it says, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. Okay, and you can kind of get a good depiction of that in the movie 300. You know, you had those weird ass looking things, but it was like what it things, creatures, but the army was great. Okay, you know, and it says in verse 5, and I was considering, behold, an he goat came from the west of on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Okay, and the goat there is the Greeks. All right, speaking of the Greeks specifically, where am I in verse 5? Alexander the Greek. Okay, that's the goat. That is the goat between the eyes. That's speaking of Alexander the Greek. Okay. In fact, let me go to Daniel the 7th chapter, and we're gonna read at verse 6. Okay, and it said, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and the dominion was given to it. Okay, so that is the same thing, just with different depictions, you know, but it's the same scenario which is being explained in the 7th chapter and in the 8th chapter. Okay, so that's speaking of Alexander the Greek, you know, also known as Alexander the Great. Right, so I read verse back in Daniel 8 and 7, and it says, and I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, which is power, and smote the ram and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Okay, you know, and that's speaking about when he died, you know. Okay, and you had the 4 generals which came out. You know, you had Antiochus, Cassander, Lacedaemonius, and Ptolemy. You know, those are the 4 generals which came, you know, after him. And then when you get into the history on it, Seleucus came after. Okay, Seleucus came after, and he hooked up with Ptolemy and Cassander to pretty much take over Antiochus, because like out of the 4, Antiochus was like very powerful. So later on down the line, Seleucus came along, and Seleucus joined up with Ptolemy. Ptolemy and Cassander. Okay, so yeah, back in verse 9, and it says, so like verse 9, Daniel 8 and 9, and it says, and out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, toward the east, toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And this little horn is speaking of who? Antiochus. Okay, Antiochus Epiphanes. And the pleasant land is speaking of Israel, Jerusalem. Okay, so he came out and waxed towards the pleasant land. Okay, and you can get a deeper idea of this in you know, the Maccabees speaks of it, you know, from the 1st chapter, which we know as what, the Maccabean revolt. Okay, because he went up in there and pretty much tried to disappear our ability, you know, to keep the laws, statutes, and commandments, and to have our ordinances as a people, you know, right? So in verse 10, and it says, and it waxed great even to the hosts of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them, which is speaking of the tribes. All right. In verse 11, yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the hosts, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. So pretty much that's speaking about he defied the Most High, man. Basically tried to like put his middle finger up to the Lord, if you will, and ransack the temple, man. Because in our culture, the temple was the center point of like Israelite life. All right. Now it was mainly Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, but later on as well. But you had the other tribes there, man. So for Israel, you can say for the Jews, but for Israel, the temple was the center point, man. It was the meeting place with the Most High. Okay, you had the order of the priesthood there. Kahan, lawyer, the priests of Levi. Okay, meaning join unto me. And they were the connectors joining the nation unto the Lord Yahweh. Okay, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. A lot of business was done in the outer courts. Okay, because you had the different courts of the temple. You had a lot. It was a meeting place. Talk about universities and schools and venues. The temple. It really starts with us in universities, houses of reading, House of Scrolls. That all started with Israel, man. So the temple was a focal point. So that was a real hard hit. That's not just no light thing of oh yeah, he just ransacked the temple and defied the Lord. No, he did it, but the level of disruption, the level of violence and disruption that brought, that destroying and ransacking of the temple really was a hard hit onto Israel, man. Okay. All right. So it says in verse 12, let me see something. This Bible was ripped. I need to get a new one. And the host was given him against the daily host was given him against the daily sacrifice, by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and purpose and prospered, Salakia. Okay. And then now in verse 13 it says, then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning a daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? So the saints which is speaking about is two angels. Okay, two angels were having a conversation, discussing how long it would take. And this is verse 14. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Now this is speaking of you got Christians that like to talk about literal or spiritual years. Nah, man, this is talking of a literal time frame. Okay, so it says unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And it came to pass, when I Daniel had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me the appearance of a man. Okay, and that man was the angel Gabriel, right? And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, Gabaya Allah, warrior of the power, make this man to understand the vision. Okay. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Okay, and that's not speaking about the end of of days. You know, a lot of people try and confuse that with like right now. No, that's talking about in that period, man, of that Babylonian Empire towards the end of the scenarios and the events that would happen. That's what that was speaking about. Okay. Which would come later on down the line. So we're in verse 18. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground. But he touched me and set me upright. So Daniel was, when it says a deep sleep, he was in a trance. So his body was like crashed out on the floor, but his spirit was in a trance, you know, experiencing all what we're reading, you know. But then the angel tapped him and basically got him up, right? So read that again. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. Okay. And that's speaking about what? The temple. Alright. For at the time appointed the end shall be. Alright. And again, that's not speaking about the end of days, you know, leading into the day of the Lord, which we're at the end of days now, you know, and the day of the Lord is when Yahweh Shai comes back. That's not speaking about now. That's speaking about what? Of the events that were shortly to come back then, in that time. But they were yet waiting for. Hence why the angel was giving him the prophecy. The angel was prophesying. The angel was telling Daniel shortly before that this is what's going to happen not too long from now. Okay, so it says in verse 20, the ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. Okay, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn is that between his eyes is the first king. Okay, and the first king is who? Alexander, man. Alexander the Greek. Okay, Alexander the Great, also known as, that's who that is, man. Okay. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. Okay. And in the latter time of their kingdom was when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding, dark sentences shall stand up. Okay, and that is speaking about Antiochus Epiphanes. All right, and you can do research, you know, like get into the secular history, and you know, obviously there's bones out there because there's a dispute on how he actually died. You know, some people say suicide, some people say he was killed. You know, but the scriptures, we know what the scriptures say, which we're going to get into it. So when you go into the secular history and do these searches, you have to be able to, through the spirit, you know, Harachah Kodash, be able to pick out the bones, man. There's a lot of good information out there, man. Okay, but obviously our primary source is the scriptures, you know. But that information out there, you know, more time it just solidifies, or not solidifies, because the scriptures is solid in and of itself. You know, the word is a two-edged sword, but it corroborates, which means to further back up what is in the scriptures, man. Okay, so where was I at? Verse 23, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding, dark sentences shall stand up. Yep, we established who that was. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Okay, and that's pretty much talking about you know, the power that's not of his own. He had mercenaries. You know, there's a great army of mercenaries with him, man. You know, and it says, and through his policy also shall he cause craft to prosper in his hand. you know, meaning that he made a lot of deals, a lot of agreements, a lot of contracts, but those contracts weren't honored by him, you know, which is like the ultimate trait of Esau, man. You know, if you do this, I'll do that. Okay, let's shake on it. That's an agreement. You know, if you do this, I'll do that. Or you do this for a particular period of time for your people, and then my people will come and help and do this. You know how it goes, man. Politics, you know, as it were, known today, man. You know, deals. A lot of these things were done, but it says what? By craft. Let's read that. He shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. So he'll get you. What he did was he got them in agreements, you know, but then he was crafty. He withdrew. What he was meant to bring to the table was withdrawn. Okay. All right. You know, making agreements and not keeping them. And he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Now that's speaking about him going against ultimately the Lord, man, you know, him being broken without hand, you know, because he wasn't, you know, we know according to the scriptures, he wasn't like murdered or anything, you know, he was broken without that. There was no physical counterpart on the earth that could be accountable for his death, man. You know, he died pretty much of he knew he got sick, and then the grief and the guilt got to him, man, you know, which we're gonna get in a short while. Okay. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told in the true, wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I arose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it. You know, so Daniel got, you know, the vision was so vivid, so clear, so intense that he got physically sick from it, man. You know, none understood it, and even Daniel himself at the time didn't really get it, you know. But you know, Daniel's back here today, you know, and of course Daniel gets it now, man. And that not only goes for Daniel, that goes for a lot of the prophets, man. You know, sometimes the visions and the prophecies weren't understood, you know, maybe a little bit, and they had an idea, you know, but didn't have the full insight. Sometimes they didn't know what the hell was going on, point blank, period. But they just got the vision, got sick, wrote it down, and kept it moving. But now the prophets are back, not to receive and write, but to break down that which was received and written. Okay, which is the scriptures, man. Okay, and obviously, you know, down the ranks, you know, from our apostles and bishop elders on down, even their teachers, you know, we were taught the scriptures, man. You know, and the meaning thereof. Okay, so we understand the prophecies now in totality, man. Okay, you know, we can read through these things and then flipping, you know, go back to work, you know, go and eat a nice lolly, you know, or go and cook some food or whatever, man. That shows that the spirit is dealing on a higher level, man. All right, you know, I ain't reading this and getting sick and passing out, you know. Now that's obviously because I'm not Daniel, and I wasn't in the vision, you know. But the fact that we can read it and understand it shows that right now the men of the Lord have a deeper insight than the prophets back then, you know. And that's not to diss them, because Abarat Azar, man, we are those men coming back in our particular lots. Okay. So verse 26, and the vision, and the vision was shut up basically because he was still in the Babylonian captivity. Okay, you know. Now to speak about what's his name, Antiochus, we can get, is it Maccabees, First Maccabees 6, man. All right, I'm gonna start from 1, and it says, about that time King Antiochus, traveling through the high countries, heard say that Elymais in the country of Persia was a city greatly renowned for riches, silver, and gold. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to verse 8. And it says, now when the king heard these words, he was, and when you start at verse 7, also that he had pulled down the abomination which he had set upon the altar in Jerusalem, and that they had compassed about the sanctuary with high walls as before, and his city Bethsura. And when the king heard these words, he was astonished and sore moved, whereupon he laid him down upon his bed and fell sick for grief, because it had not befallen him as he looked for. Okay. Verse 9, and there he continued many days, for his grief was ever more and more. So day by day his grief increased, and he made account that he should die. So he got to the realization, nah man, I ain't gonna pull through. I'm not gonna make it. I'm gonna die soon, you know. He came to that realization, and it says, wherefore he called for all his friends, and said unto them, the sleep is gone from mine eyes, and my heart faileth for very care. And I thought with myself, into what tribulation am I come, and how great a flood of misery it is it, wherein now I am. For I was bountiful and beloved in my power, but now I remember. So he was thinking, why the hell is this happening to me? Then it came back to him. The Lord, Yahweh, put it in his head. Okay, verse 12, but now I remember the evils that I did at Jerusalem, and that I took the vessels of gold and silver that were therein, and sent to destroy the inhabitants of Judea without a cause. So he realized how he messed up, man. You know, like the saying goes, you know you done fucked up, right? You know, and you be thinking, how? Yeah, he got that moment, you know, he got that realization moment. Oh shit, yeah, this is what I did. Okay, I perceive therefore, verse 13, I perceive therefore that this cause, these troubles are come upon me, and behold, I perish through great grief in a strange land. Okay, you know, and then you know that it was divided up, man. And verse 40, in fact, where is it? In verse 13, I perceive therefore, for this cause troubles are come upon me, behold, I perish, though through great grief in a strange land. Then called he for Philip, one of his friends, whom he made ruler over all his realm. Okay. There's a particular verse I want. Where does it go? And he gave him the crown and his robe and his signet, to the end he should bring up his son Antiochus and nourish him for the kingdom. So King Antiochus died there in the 149th year. Okay, you know, so nobody killed him, man. You know, according to like what some secular history would like to portray. You know, he was got by the Lord, man, in a sickness and in great grief and what's the word, guilt for what he'd done in Jerusalem without cause, which he actually admitted, man. There was no reason, there was no cause for it, you know. So that's it, man. So like I said, that's been a brief overview of Daniel, the 8th chapter. Like I said, you know, if I was probably on like an on-screen lesson, could probably pull up, you know, secular history documents and websites, you know, and get into it. But, you know, verse for verse, that's what it pretty much means, man. That's Daniel, the 8th chapter. Lord willing, Abba Razah has been edifying, man. What have we got here? We've got some brothers, you know, GMS in the Truth Orlando, Shalom, Yahweh Bashim Yashai, Barakatah, the elder Yashawamba, Shalom, Yahweh Bashim Yashai, Barakatah. And to all you Akim wa Akwaf, man, Yahweh Bashim Yashai, Barakatah. You know, so with that I'm out, man. Barakatah Yahweh, Basham Yahweh Shai, Basham Rechak Wadash, man. Shalom.